Good evening, folks. I am Benny Scala, the one and only player, and welcome back to another episode of When It Was Real. This show focuses exclusively on the halcyon days of the WWWF in the 1970s, which to us guys was the perfect time to grow up as a professional wrestling fan. Now, even though between my hair and the tie-dyed shirt, I look like I'm waiting for the next Woodstock revival, I really have been in a relationship with wrestling since 1968. But now, in stunning contrast, is this other gentleman who is the essence of suave and debonair. He is noted WWWF historian and author of the marvelous book, When It Was Real, Mr. Nikita Brezhnikov. Nikita, this is our 5th episode, but I got to tell you that Wednesday night is rapidly becoming my favorite time of the week. We get to climb into the that beloved wrestling Wayback Machine and go back to a time, well, when it was real. So thanks again for being a part of this.
Oh, I enjoy it. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Monte and the Pharaoh for sponsoring us. And wow, it's a lot of fun. So let's get the yickety yakking.
Yeah, I think we're onto something good here. But now, speaking of tie-dyed shirts, got a quick word from our sponsor. Then on to what I think is going to be a very good show. But hang on one second. This is Benny Scala, the one and only player. Folks, I am beyond excited to be co-hosting this new show, When It Was Real. And I am just as excited to be announcing our new sponsor, the Free Spirited Company. Free Spirited is a phenomenal old-school clothing company that specializes in short and long-sleeve T-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, graphic tees, heck, even yoga pants. These T-shirts are, to quote Rocky's manager, Mickey Goldmill, a wake of art. Yours truly will be rocking the Free Spirited merch on each and every episode of When It Was Real. Not only are these shirts eye-catching, but they are very comfortable as well. Like what you see? Please go to shopfreespirited.com and use our special code MP20 to receive a 20% discount on all purchases. Again, that is shopfreespirited.com, and that code is MP20. As the poet laureate of the Monte The Pharaoh YouTube channel, I will leave you with this. If you like what you see, go buy a tee. Heck, maybe 2 or 3. When your friends tell you, hey, you look like the bomb, send them over to shopfreespirited.com. And for all who doubt,
Laurence Olivier couldn't do
there
better.
You go. I am the new fashion plate of professional wrestling. But Nikita, so far we've covered 4 bona fide legends in the professional wrestling business. We've covered both the babyface and the heel side. Now tonight will be the proverbial horse of a different color. Tonight we're going to look at the women of the WWWF in the 1970s. And, you know, whenever I watch one of their matches from back then, I'm reminded of really how different it is from what we see on TV every Monday and Friday night. But boy, oh boy, when we watched them back then, they really had our attention, didn't they?
Oh, man, did they ever.
I was the word maybe transfixed when I would see a Vickie Williams or a Tony Rose or, yeah.
And at my age, we were in love.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely had some crushes there. But so we normally do a toast. So let's do a toast to the ladies. So the immortal Yogi Berra once had a night for him in his honor at Yankee Stadium, and they called it Yogi Berra Night. Can you imagine that? But one thing that he said at the very end, he said, "Thank you for making this night necessary." It's a little bit off there, but you know, I think it applies for tonight. So to the women of the WWWF in the 1970s, thank you for making this night necessary. Salute.
You got it. Salute. Zdravia to you women.
Ooh,
I want to take one more quick drink, Benny. 20 years ago today, Nikolai Volkov went into the Hall of Fame. As you know, he's gone, but I can't believe it's been 20 years. 20 years.
Buddy Rogers once said to a nicer guy it couldn't happen. He's talking about himself, and that was a bunch of bullshit. But like when it comes to a guy like Nikita, absolutely true.
Amen. Hey, you know, it's funny you mentioned that too, because this is a segue. You know, Moolah used to be with Buddy Rogers, a slave girl Moolah.
Long time ago. Yep. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yes, absolutely. Well, she came along there, but Nikita, I think the best way to approach this is to feature these ladies one at a time and talk about their fabulous careers. And you just said fabulous. Who else would we start with? But the fabulous Moolah, Lillian Ellison, I believe her real name was. And
Yes.
I remember the first time I saw her was in Wrestling Review when I bought one of my first magazines. And, one night watching Saturday Night, Channel 47, WNJU TV, Newark, New Jersey, which I had to put a coat hanger on my antenna and wrap it in cellophane, stand on my head 47 feet away, click my heels 3 times, and I could get decent reception. But that one night, the Moolah was on there from D.C., working a TV match. Forget who she wrestled. But now, to me, Nikita, this lady was and still is a polarizing figure in women's wrestling. What are your thoughts on Moolah?
Well, for Moolah, she hits home because she won the belt at it was on Monroe Street. It was called the Coliseum in Baltimore. This was before the Civic Center. This goes all the way back to September 18th of 1956.
Yikes.
Now, now the belt, she beat another wonderful woman at that time, Mildred Burke. And it was like, wow, Moolah, she did have her face put on the belt. And it's like, or wait a minute, was it Mildred Burke? Let me see. Who did Moolah beat? Because that does go back. Because I got it in my.
I think you're right, but
I think it was Mildred Burke. But the 1956, it's like, wow, that the tenure that she held it's like all the way till the war that settled the score on MTV on July 23rd of 1983 85, right? It was 1985 when they did that.
So she's like early 60s by then, no?
Well, but she still had the belt. And there it is with Cyndi Lauper's bringing in Wendy Richter, who teamed with Moolah, came out of Moolah's camp. Yes, she did have a school. Yes, she did train. As far as some of the stories, I don't want to touch upon any of that. Whatever people, I don't know. Sometimes you got to listen to 3 sides of the story before you can figure out.
I've gotten that both ways, Nikita, because I've had several women on our show, including Princess Victoria, Sue Green, Desiree Peterson. They all have something to say. Some pretty good, some not so good.
Right. Well, I used to talk with Ann Casey a lot. And Ann said, I never had any problem. Of course, Ann was kind of a pretty good size in her day, and she could probably handle a man and not have any problem with Moolah. But you got to remember, it was the payday. You don't want to get the boss pissed off at you. So, but she says she had a good relationship with her. But I mean, look how Moolah transcends from 50s. The 60s, it's kind of like, where the hell did they work? How do you make a living as a female wrestler? Because, I mean, you didn't have a lot of places. You certainly wasn't in Madison Square Garden. Baltimore Civic Center came along in 63, but they weren't quite ready for that yet because they weren't even monthly. They were like maybe 4 times a year. It didn't start to pick up until 72. So it's like, where the hell do you go to make the money? But luckily, it did start to level off. So here she is with Vince McMahon Sr. Jr. loved her too, and she reciprocated. She was always good with the family there. And as it carried into the 80s, Moolah stayed in good shape, but this deal with Cyndi Lauper and MTV, it was just like, man, Vince was a genius. Things are exploding here. He took this and he just made it. It was a little bit of a circus, but it was a good circus. It was well orchestrated. And okay, Moolah turns the belt over to Wendy Richter. It's like, she was probably ready.
I mean, they were printing money at that point.
Yes. And it was nice. And Moolah was in the cartoon, and so was Wendy Richter. So, hey, that was a nice, hey, thanks a lot for being there all these years. Because you can imagine. And I know women don't, especially back then, they weren't making what a man makes, without a doubt. They certainly didn't have the as we just got done saying, the level of you're not appearing on every card. Now, today, of course, it's a mainstay. But again, like Aunt Casey used to say, she said, honey, when we went out to wrestle, we were in a one piece bathing suit. We didn't look like we were going to go do striptease somewhere. We were out there to do the job. And it was like, yeah, I know. And I remember, and you still look good, without a
Right.
doubt.
Right.
And back then, the mindset, for me, not so much. Like we talk, Vickie Williams, to us, she was just gorgeous. Tony Rose, Joyce Grable, Donna Christianella, these women were like, ooh, they're eye catching. I was more involved with seeing the men go at it, but this was, and as Chief used to say, when they have the women, the houses go up. So we're always happy to see women. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense. But in the perverted mind, I think they were there coming to see it like a cat fight, to put it in layman's terms. Even remember the apartment wrestling that always was
Oh, and the
featured.
aftermath, yeah.
Yeah, and that was featured on the front. It wasn't hidden inside. There was a nice shot, so your eyes would go wahoo, wahoo, like True Detective magazines. It's like in the grocery store, and sometimes it's like you shouldn't have kids walking by looking at this. You got a guy with a knife chasing a woman that's half naked, and it's like, man, this is really weird stuff. But it sold, and back then the brains, I don't think sometimes were fully developed with people that were in charge, and it's kind of like you let that stuff slide through the cracks. But yeah, they were a sideshow. There's no other way to describe it. Otherwise, you would have had, and we did see women's division rankings in the magazines.
Oh yeah.
That was good. Moolah was always at the top, but I would have to suspect that her best opponent was Vickie Williams, in my opinion, anyway. And she was always ranked right near the top. And it was always a great match. So for Moolah, and you would see Moolah usually in tag matches, it was her girls. So she was usually involved because, again, what did they appear? Maybe 4 times a year if you were lucky to see them that much.
Right.
So it's like, all right, so you got to give Moolah the pay, especially in the Garden. You're going to pick up the big payday. And again, I'm sure the pay was there was a wide gap between what the top men were getting and what the top women were getting.
Well, and for the women, you had that extra layer because a lot of times, from what I understand, from what they've told me, was that the promoter would pay Moolah, and then Moolah would take her little cut out of that and then give it to the girls.
Yes. That was definitely like a freelance kickback kind of a thing. If you want to work, I'll be the booker. Even though I'm a working booker, I'll be there. But yeah, you're going to definitely give me, because otherwise you're not going to talk to the McMahons. Or more importantly, they're not going to talk to you because I'm providing the talent here.
Right.
I'll tell you, the first time, and I had more respect once I got into the business, when I actually saw what they go through. The first 2 ladies I saw going at it were Debbie Combs and Rockin' Robin. And it was like, oh, holy shit. And, I watched them when they come out of the ring, and it was like, man, when you take those shots to the chest, if they were in a car accident and they sustained that type of impact, they'd probably be in a hospital overnight for observation. They're not meant to take the physical abuse a man's body is. Their bone structure, the ligaments, the muscles. You got to give them their due. It's like, wow, it's impressive. And again, you've got to love what you're doing to get in there and take that kind of abuse, because Moolah could lay the shots in. I mean, you'd hear it. And Dick Worley used to run a good little skit with her or actually it was Barney Solomon. They had it on the Spectrum on the Prism Network, some of the highlight reels. And Moolah, he went to Barney Solomon. If anybody remembers him, an old time referee, he goes to check Moolah over, and she throws her chest out, and he turns his head, and then she puts her butt out, and he picks his hand like he's going to slap her on the ass. And it's like, of course he didn't, because she'd have probably given a black eye. But it's nice. That was a time when you could let your hair down and relax, and something like that, it would just relieve people's tensions. It was the catharsis that people needed. They didn't sit there and say, pick the whole thing apart, and I was like, oh man, you want to burn the building down over it.
It was a nice diversion from the men's matches.
Sure. I was never big on the midgets. I think that was a stretch. That was getting into Barnum and Bailey a little bit too much. But the women definitely had a place, and they definitely had a spot on the card. As look at it is today, Trish Stratus is probably the most famous female wrestler of all time now, I would say.
Right.
Thanks to the great Ron Hutchinson from Canada, my old buddy. You got to give a shout out to Ron. He's trained so many. But it's like, yeah, Moolah, our generation knows, but then the next generation, like the Monday Night Raw with Stone Cold, Trish Stratus would be it for them. And not that I would, because it's like, wow. She even puts Vickie Williams to sleep for me, but that's okay.
She was very athletic, and in the beginning, she was kind of awkward with her promos, but she really grew into it very quickly.
Sure. I mean, like everybody and anybody, you get better as you go along.
Yeah, she definitely picked it up.
Yes, it's just a matter of procedure. Just do it enough, you'll get it. You'll catch on to it. And I know for a fact that when, I think we talked about it before, when they did the promos, it was just kind of like, shoot from the hip. We're not redoing this. We don't have time, and we don't have the money. However it turns out, it turns out. Don't worry about it. And especially Monday Night Raw was definitely live. There's no bullshit about that. It was like, what you see is what's happening. I mean, if anybody screwed up and said the wrong thing, there was no 10-second delay or anything like that. It's going on the air. It's out there.
Right. Like Jim Ross told Sid, we're live, pal. But Nikita, since I'm going to call you the Professor Emeritus of professional wrestling. That's a very high designation, but definitely well deserved. I do have a couple of things I want you to break down for everyone. So at WrestlingData.com, when you look at Moolah's history, it does show her title matches as NWA Women's Championship matches. I always heard that the belt was Moolah's belt. Was it hers, or was it actually recognized by the NWA?
It was recognized, but it was Moolah's belt. That's why her picture was on it. Because, they probably didn't have a belt. You think about it, it's like, okay, yeah, she's the woman's champion. But when Vicky Williams and Joyce Grable became the women's tag team champions, going back to October 15th of 73, I had no idea that Donna Cristianello and Tony Rose were the former champions, but that was really NWA. But what did we hear? It's the Worldwide Wrestling Federation women. And it's like women's tag team. And it's like, that was neat. They took a couple of pictures with the old man, and then poof, it's gone. It's like, why? That would have been something. Another match, ladies tag team title match. Really, Velvet McIntyre and Princess Victoria, they got that up and running in their tenure in the 80s. They had more opportunity to run with it, and they got more because they were pretty much doing the circuit on a much more regular basis, not monthly, but they were starting to get to be known a lot more. So it's like, they let them run, and that was great. So I don't know why. I guess it seemed like the thing to do. Let's capitalize on it. And you got to admit they capitalized on it, because what the hell else did they do with it other than take some photos? And that was the end of it.
Right. And we just talked about this, and we said this in so many words, but when I looked at even Moolah or Vicky Williams or, Dottie Downs, any of these wrestlers, and you look at their bookings, they didn't stay in a territory for more than a week or two. So were they more of an attraction like an Andre or even an Ernie Ladd, where they didn't stay in the territory for months. They stayed for a week and they went to the next place?
Well, let me run it down for you. For whatever reason, it seemed like 1972 was the turn. That's when the door was open. It started on the 1st in Philadelphia at the old Philadelphia Arena. Paula Kay and Moolah beat Vickie Williams and Debbie Johnson. Okay, so that's one female match. Then we went to Baltimore, and with Baltimore, this really starts to blow the roof off. On January 19th, they had more women's matches than they did men. It was a battle royal. Now they had Bobo beat Stasiak, Pedro, the champion, fought Blassie to a draw, and then the Rugged Russians beat Victor Rivera and Renee Goulet. But then you got Sandy Parker won the battle royal, so she got a match with Moolah. Tony Rose was there. Vicky was there. Sue Green was there. White Venus, if anybody remembers that name. Sandy Parker. Debbie Johnson was in there. So it's like all of a sudden, 1970. Now, this is Baltimore, okay? And Baltimore was not established yet as monthly, and it ran, that was a Wednesday night. So the bean counters didn't feel like they qualified that you'll be able to draw people on Saturday nights here. So we're going to take away booking from another city that might draw and give it to you. So Baltimore had to earn that. But they stayed pretty, they went to Washington, D.C., same deal. Whole carload of women were there for that one. And I'm not using that derogatory, but it's like, you know, it was a nice amount of women on the roster. They came back to Baltimore in March. And again, because you saw that thing that I sent you, it was a copy of the program. And another situation where it was more women than men. And not that that was bad, but it was definitely different, especially for that time. And again, we have to connect the dots and say, you know, Baltimore, Phil Zacco was the promoter. They're trying to get the Phil Zacco was, let me think, was he vice president? He was the treasurer of Capital Wrestling Corporation. So he's in there with Vince Sr. and Gilzenberg and Arnold Skolin and Monsoon. And it's like, but you got to make them believe that you're going to be able to draw on a regular basis on a Saturday night. So it's like, okay, we got to make this work. So how are we going to do it? So it's like, did they use the women to lure more men there? They drew 4,000 on the March 29th. I know that much. And because it's tough to get attendance figures for some of those older dates. It really is. But, you know, 4,000, Baltimore held 10. And it was still a pretty new venue in 72. It opened in 60.
That's a Wednesday night, though. I mean, I would imagine it'd be really tough to get a huge crowd on a Wednesday night.
Well, it was, and it wasn't a section of the city that you wanted to go in. It was pretty much like you see in the old movies, like the docks and things like that. It's like, yeah, it wasn't well lit. They did well with concerts, like when the Beatles hit Baltimore and things like that. Other and like Elvis, all these other performers, and it's like they drew good crowds, but you know, to bring people back monthly, because you know, like a concert, what are you going to go once a couple of years to see whoever your favorite performer? It's not like they're there on a regular basis. So
unless you're a deadhead, maybe. Like,
well, you know, you'll go to see all these different performers, but
right.
It's tough to keep that standard, to maintain that. So, you know, did they bring the women in to say, hey, let's throw it out, reel these fish in and say, hey, come see these women beat each other up? Because I'll tell you what, they didn't hit the Garden until July 1st of that year for whatever reason. And I have an article that was written, and I'm not positive where this appeared, but I do have the author of the article. And they interviewed Moolah because it says the state tosses in the towel. The ladies wrestle at the Garden. Marsha Kramer, she's the one that wrote it. And they talked about Moolah, and they featured her in the article, which, of course, how can you not? So the funny thing was they talked to, because Moolah said her greatest thrill was to wrestle in the Garden. She was from, of course, Columbia, South Carolina. And she said, you know, she was a scrapper, and when she was tough. She was 5'4" and 138 pounds. And I'll tell you this story real quick. the late great Howard Finkel.
Thanks.
And what a wonderful ring announcer. He only made 2 mistakes that I know of, especially in the Garden. And the first one was Vickie Williams was going to wrestle Moolah. It was August 26th of 78. And Howard's going to, Vickie's the challenger, so she gets introduced first. So Howard says, and from Savannah, Georgia, weighing 230. Oh, I'm sorry, 130. Vickie just gives it like a half smile, like, don't be giving me extra 100 pounds there, Mo. So that was pretty interesting. But anyways, the story continues about the Garden. They talked to, and when they interviewed a man from the State Athletic Commission, he just basically said, I don't know. They've been hollering. They've been bothering us for a long time now, and we just decided to give in and let them do it. So they did talk to the one and only Miss Georgette Krieger. And Georgette says she wasn't a big fan of it. She says, big deal. All those old bags, all they do is pull each other's hair. They should stay home where they belong. Quoting Miss Krieger. And she's long gone, guys, so you can't do anything about it. Now she's probably got the devil ready to put his pension papers in by now. But, yep, that was Miss Krieger's quote.
Yeah, she might take his place.
I'm not going to say that word, but, yeah, that's possible.
Boy, but what a fan she was, right? You talk about, I mean, she was everywhere.
Well, she was mostly in that corridor of Baltimore. She didn't go to Philly. For whatever reason.
She went to the Garden, though, didn't she, or no?
The Garden. She would go to the Garden because she could take the subway or the train. The train would take her, or the bus. One of the two would get her up there, and then she'd take the subway to the Garden. But Philly was tough, and she didn't drive. And she used to go with her sister, so they would travel together. And, Capitol Center, she would hit the Landover. I don't know how the hell she got there because, I mean, that was not anywhere near public transportation. In fact, when you got off the beaten path, which was 295, it was like, son of a bitch. It was like the get from the main road across the parking lot was like going across country. It was unbelievable. It was a huge parking lot, but it was a nice building. So anyway, yeah, Moolah was there. They start to give her more bookings in Madison Square Garden. I mean, she didn't set the world on fire. As none of the ladies did right away, but then, they brought Vickie in to wrestle Moolah, and that seemed to be like, that's your go-to match. You want to put a big draw, whether it's the Garden, Baltimore, wherever, Vickie Williams against Moolah, because it's just kind of like they could work well together. And that match I told you about where Howard had the blurb with the weight, Vickie got cut in that match. Moolah slammed her hard into the buckle. And you could see it wasn't like the Sheik bleeding or somebody like that, but she had a pretty good gash across her eye. And it definitely was bleeding. It wasn't running down her face, but you could see, because Vince made mention of it. He said, Miss Williams appears to have been cut above the eye. And it was tough, but you know what? You could see it. She did run out of gas. It was just kind of like, thump. They did it like a double roll up, and then Moolah just flopped on her, and Vickie just looked like she was finished. She was just
ready to go.
So it was a good match, though. Very good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to bring these two guys up. So we have to talk about these two ladies. We already mentioned them. When I started watching in 1968, they were the first two women that I ever saw, and that's Tony Rose and Donna Christianello. So if we consider Moolah the Babe Ruth of women's wrestling, to me, these ladies have to be the Lou Gehrig of tag teams. They won the women's tag team titles on multiple occasions, and they seemed like they were conjoined at the hip. But I do know they had separate careers besides being with each other, and I think they often actually wrestled each other, right?
Yes, and those were the belts that Vickie Williams and Joyce Grable won. And it's like, I don't know, are they NWA? I had to imagine they were. And at that time, they really, the WW Capitol, it was not at war with the NWA. They had split all the way back in 63. Actually, 62, they split, and then it was like, okay, but they didn't like close the door. They would still trade talent. They would still allow people to cross-reference. You can come here, I'll go there. And so I think that's where this came from. I would have to imagine they were actually NWA Tag Team Ladies Champions. And then, of course, they said it was the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. So made sense.
But they were frequently in the territory. That's one thing I forgot to ask you here. So I tracked Moolah's career. I mean, she wrestled forever, but it seemed like back in the 70s, she was all over the country, but she wrestled the majority of her matches on the East Coast. Was that because she lived in South Carolina, or maybe because we were like such good fans, or was it maybe her relationship with Vince Sr.?
Oh, definitely the relationship. And if you're not drawing, they're not going to book you. And they were drawing. So it's like, fine, and Moolah was like the foreman. So it's like, fine, Moolah's on the card, no problem. Who else are you going to bring in? And she would mix it up. You didn't always see Moolah against Vickie Williams, but you would see, Donna Christianella would be in there a lot. And sometimes, like Boston had Joyce Grable against Moolah. This goes back to 1980. That was the night that Bruno faced Peter Maivia. Backlund was in Japan, so Bruno filled in the main event. That was early. I think it was January 20th of 80. And it was a great match. I mean, Joyce, it looked like, because she did another roll-up. She looked like she had Moolah. She was actually starting to celebrate, and then Moolah rolled her up, and then 1, 2, 3. It was like, damn. And I did get to meet Joyce Grable at Cauliflower Alley a couple of years ago. What a wonderful woman. It was an honor. And there was a lot of girls there because, it's taking off. I had the pleasure and the honor of managing Jessie Bell. And, Joyce took time and she spoke with the girls and told them, gave her insight as to what to expect and how to protect themselves, not from predators, which is a good idea. Of course, every woman should know that. But, in the ring, it's like, you're going to get hurt. So be careful. And if you get hurt, you're not going to work. It's the bottom line.
Even though Moolah, she always booked herself on top, but a lot of those matches, I remember the first time I saw her, I think it was in 68, and I can't, for the life of me, can't remember who she wrestled, but she actually got pinned. It was a 2 out of 3 fall match. She got pinned in the first fall, and I'm thinking, holy crap, I'm going to watch a title change. And then she came back and took the next 2 falls, but it was a very competitive match.
Now, see, that's the way to do it. I never understood the WWF's theory, because the NWA would do it, right? Harley Race would get pinned in a 2 out of 3 fall match. It's like, it doesn't mean you're finished. It happens. I beat you, so tonight I lose. Tomorrow night or next week I come back. But they always had this mindset, especially if it was a title match, it had to be some kind of bullshit involved. And it's like, why? That stinks. It can be a clean pin. Bruno was a clean pin with Koloff, right?
Right, and Bruno went out to San Francisco, wrestled Ray Stevens, and he got pinned in San Francisco.
Sure. So it's like, it can happen. It doesn't mean your career is over. But they look at it like, well, it's going to take the heat away, and we don't want to do that. And like, yeah, okay, it's stupid. That's why we said 6-mans were great, because now you're going to be able to see people that you'll never see a pin in any other type of match unless you're leaving the area, and usually as a heel. So it's like, that's the only time you're actually going to take a clean pin from anybody.
Right. Well, let me get our next. Here we go. My favorite, the great Vicky Williams, besides being a blonde beauty, like you said, she wrestled in the first women's match in the history of MSG against Moolah. And you said they chose her for a reason, because they knew that she would give Moolah, she'd provide a good match. They worked well together, right?
Well, you had the perfect combination there. Vicky was beautiful, and she was athletic. How the hell she wrestled barefoot is beyond me. I mean, I can't even imagine walking around the house without shoes. And you're in the ring. I mean, son of a bitch. She had to break every toe at some point. It's like a dancer. People think, oh, well, it's an elegant life. Oh, it's glamorous. It's like, ever see a dancer's feet? It looks like they've been mangled by some type of
Right.
sadistic bastard with pliers because they break every toe. It just goes with the territory. And I'm sure it had to happen to Vicky because Nikolai said one time he forgot his boots. He said, "Man, I almost broke my neck because I don't know how to walk around without them." It's like, I know. It's really weird. And if you don't believe me, just try walking around, even with your shoes, with one sock off. Don't do it at home and don't hurt yourself.
Right.
Don't
Yeah.
do
Folks
anything.
don't do this at home.
But if you do it, you're gonna feel it's a difference. So I don't know how she pulled it off. And Vicky was like a high flyer. She would be the female equivalent of Mil Mascaras. So
Yeah.
she gave you the money's worth every time.
Yeah. Definitely. No, there wasn't a lot of high spots, but she was more, like you said, of a high flyer.
She did a lot of drop kicks.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of hair grabbing. And it's natural. Why the hell not? Because Moolah would start it. She'd grab her by the hair, flip her around 2 or 3 times, and then it's like, okay, bitch, now it's your turn. She'd grab Moolah.
You got to get the payback there, right?
Yep. So it's like, okay, it was good. People enjoyed it. There's not a problem with that. I didn't witness the female battle royal, but I bet you it was wild. It had to be. And
Right.
Baltimore is a good showcase because that was the problem though for them. Like I've heard our good friend Davey O'Hannon speaks of it, and Johnny Rods. Baltimore was a boxing ring, and it was much higher off the floor, and it was hard, like working on a slab of concrete. So
Bruno
it had to
always said concrete. Yes.
Yep, Bruno used to and Dominic, they said, Baltimore, son of a bitch. So a battle royal in Baltimore, you could just look at it. I don't know if you were ever there or not, Benny, but
No, I was not.
Been there 100 times, and it was like, yeah, that son of a bitch is high off the mat, off the floor. So you probably added an extra 3 feet and you got to come down. So hopefully, like Gorilla Monsoon used to say, there's 2 ways to land, lucky or unlucky. And, hopefully, but how Vicky did that without breaking an ankle, it's beyond me.
Now this is something that I learned only by my research for the show, but she had a great career. She won the women's tag belts with Joyce Grable several times, but she's out of professional wrestling before she's 30, Vicky. And now Moolah would have wrestled if she was still alive. Probably she'd be about 103. But Tony Rose, Donna Christianella, they were also out pretty early. So was it because they grew weary of the travel, too much strain on their body, weary of Moolah, or did they just want to maybe raise a family?
All of the above, I'd have to say, Benny. It's like we've talked about this before. Travel, it's just so brutal. And back then it was most cars. A few times you'd take planes, but for the ladies, they had time to get around because they weren't booked too. Now, see, like when I was reading about 72, okay, that's all drivable. You can get from city to city. You're driving, no problem. But if like today you're going to be at Baltimore, tomorrow they book you in Houston, now you're going to be flying without a doubt. And it gets old. Hotel life, diner food and everything else, and the physical beating that their bodies take. It's too much.
Yeah. They were all, I think both Rose and Christianella both out in their early 30s. Vicky was out, I think, by the time she was 29. Yeah, but then you got Moolah, who's wrestling. I think she wrestled like 81. Her and Mae Young, they would have, they'd still be going if they were alive.
Well, Mae Young was remarkable. Because she was up there in years when she was doing her Monday Night Raw bits, and some of those were very deep. It was a lot of wild shit that she was pulling, a lot of maneuvers. So she was getting Dudley bombed onto tables. At like 80-something years, she took it like a champ. Yeah, she did, and she was able to get up and
right,
sold it, but she was still able to walk off at the end of the night. And it's like, wow, that's amazing because that's just tough. And her body, she's another one. Like we talked Ernie Ladd last week, all through the years. All that stuff comes back to tap you on the shoulder as you get older and say, hey, remember what you did, goof? And it's like, oh, boy, you feel it.
I always joke with Davey O'Hannon. I asked him if, like, or, you know, do you get a plaque from the American Medical Association because you keep all these surgeons in business? I don't know how many surgeries that guy's had. You know, and he retired in 1990, I think. He's still getting surgeries.
Exactly.
Bruno got like 15 of them, I think. I mean, it just, you know, this is what they went through.
Well, see, then, like, let me think. It was like, okay, it was right after 9/11. So that had to be 2001 that Bruno had a car accident. Because when I met up with him, it was a couple of shows up in Jersey City, and it had just happened a few months before. But from his previous injuries, the car accident just highlighted. It's like putting gasoline on a fire. You know, when the fire is almost out, you got it under control, and then you just light it up again. That's like, yeah, you know, it's tough. It's there. These skeletons, I mean, if you could look at them other than just x-rays, and it's like, boy, it's brutal shit.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back when you least need it to come back, when you're older, you know, and then it all catches up with you. And
yeah, but if you do have an accident or something like that, and then it's like, you know, for the layman, it'll put them down for however long. That's why I always laugh. It's like, okay, people complain they get whiplash, and you know, oh well, they're out of work for a month or so. It's like, what the F happens when you get thrown into the buckle? That's a whiplash, man. You see that? And you could tell after Bruno's broken neck, when he'd take a buckle, they'd have to give him a couple of seconds to recover, because I know that had to like triple vibrate through that body after the broken neck. It's like, oh my God, there's no easy way to do that.
I mean, my very first show was in, I think it was April 26, 1968, Island Garden. It was Bruno and Tanaka. You know, at the end of the match, they're running the ropes, but when they collided, I mean, the whole place shook. I mean, it felt like a mini, or I mean, like I felt the ground vibrate, and they both hit the mat hard. Like that could not have been very pleasant for either one of them.
And to give the ladies their due, it would sound like a thunderstorm when you heard the slams in the arena. They were equal. They did not hold back. They put it all out there. That's why I say, you know, a forearm smash for a man to take it into pecs, not a big deal. But for a woman, it's like the danger.
A little bit different. A little bit different body chemistry there.
Yeah, and they were doing it. It's like, oh man, that's got to be brutal. And there you go. You're asking the question, and it's like, I got it really in the back of my brain. I'm no genius, but it's like, it had to take a toll. It really did.
Absolutely.
Like a boxer. What does a boxer take off? 4 or 5 months? The old days, at least. Muhammad Ali and George.
Oh yeah, you had a champion had maybe 2 or 3 titles, maybe 3 in a year, but no more than that.
Sure.
Sometimes only 1 or 2.
Wrestlers should be doing the same, but it's not going to work. You got to get out there and make the money.
Very painful reminder from J.A. Will in the chat room. He said, you can feel 30 plus years of weight training many mornings. I'm on my 37th year of lifting weights, and I definitely feel it every morning when I get out of bed.
Well, your buddy and mine, Ken Patera, he said it one night, was no bullshit. First man to military press 500 pounds.
World's strongest man, legitimately.
If you don't know what that means, you pick up the weight off the floor, up over your head. 500 pounds, people. Can you imagine that? Because he said, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking about. He said, because I didn't make that much money from it. And now look at me. Now I'm paying the price for it. And it's like, sure, you better believe it. Yeah. That will take its toll on your skeleton. It just will. You're not meant to abuse your body that way. And I'm saying not wrestling, just weightlifting. Then when you add wrestling, geez, I don't know how he walks.
No, I mean, there's no free passes. The best you're going to get is an IOU, but Father Time always comes to collect, right?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, geez, it's just horrible. Okay, here's another one. North Attleboro. Moolah pin Sue Green. Tex, good old Sue Green. She's still taking like a Timex watch. July 28th of 72. Now, Attleboro, they didn't have a whole lot of, I mean, that was a small venue. And they would usually run, okay, like this night, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 matches. That's unusual. Usually it's 4 matches, but they couldn't have got that much money. And that's like going to the other side of the world, North Attleboro, all the way up there. I mean, geez. And like, let me see. Give me a second, people, just in case. Okay, here you go. Moolah was in New York on July 29th. So, I mean, that's like the next day. It was a Saturday night in the Garden. That's a hell of a long drive, upstate Massachusetts, all the way to New York. That's a long ass run. And she wrestled Sue Green again. So it was like very good. You know, that's nice.
Speaking of Tex, here she is. Actually, a 2-time guest on Dan and Benny. Again, one of my favorites. What I liked about her, Nikita, is that she looked like she could legit kick the shit out of any of the women and probably half the men. I actually would have liked to have seen a Tex Green Silvana Souza match.
We know who the winner would be.
My money's on Tex Green on that one.
Oh, yes, sir.
So I have a story. She mentioned, and I've heard it, like I've seen it in print before, that she, in February of 76, she made Moolah tap in a match. And I'm not sure where it was. There's no record of it on WrestlingData.com. But apparently, like, she had the belt. And I guess McMahon, Vince Sr., had to pay her to give the belt back. I guess before the match, Moolah, like, slapped her or something like that. And Tex didn't take too kindly of it. And she stretched Moolah, made her tap out. Like I said, not recognized by anybody. I don't see it anywhere, but she's mentioned it, and I've seen it written before. Have you heard of that?
No, I never heard that one. That's a first, but I believe it without a doubt. Because, just like you said, if you slapped her and you got things started, hey, look, people, it happens where I don't like him, he doesn't like me, and the tempers flare. And it's not unusual. It'll give a promoter an ulcer because it's like, what are they going to do out there? But it can take place. And in this case, it was a title change. And that's why, at least I always heard, the champion had to put up, $30,000? Because if you decide to go into business for yourself, we're going to keep that 30 grand and you can stick that belt up your ass. We'll figure out how to tell the people whatever happened. But yeah, they tried to protect their business that way.
Yeah. So they legit had to put up like 30 grand cash, and then they got it back, I guess, whenever like Superstar had to put it up when he won the belt from Bruno.
Yes, without a doubt.
Wow.
I'm sure, especially him, because Bruno you never had to worry about, because Bruno is like, he's not part of the company, but yet he is the company without a doubt. Without Bruno, you got nothing, and that was proven so many times.
Right.
But yeah, they may have made him give it up too. Well, you heard the story how his belt was stolen.
Wasn't he in a restaurant in the city in Manhattan? He had it he left it in his car.
Yes.
Imagine that. You casually walking by Bruno's car. Oh, look at that. That must be Bruno's title. I think I'll take it for myself.
Can you imagine coming across that in some kind of thrift store or somebody wanting to pawn coffee? It's like, holy shit. How much do you want?
Wow. But now here's the last minute edition. And we chatted about her briefly, is Debbie Johnson. We actually tried to reach her to appear on the show, but we weren't able to connect with her. Another lady with a very good, but she was another one. Only had a 2 or 3 year career, I think. And she wrestled Moolah for the ladies' title at the very first showdown at Shea on September 30th, 1972. Ironically, I think they were the match before the 75-minute Pedro Bruno snooze fest. And her mom was also a professional wrestler, going by the name of Dottie Downs. I'm sorry. But Nikita, I understand that Debbie had some great stories to tell. And my bet is that when it was real, we're going to get the scoop on those.
You better believe it. She has an open invitation. We'll change whatever programming we have.
Yeah, card subject to change. Definitely for her. We'll drop whatever we're doing. And we'll let her tell her story, because she apparently has a lot to tell.
Please come and join us. We will be
no censorship, no filter. You say whatever you want.
Yes, you can tell us whatever you need to tell us.
But I did want to put up one more picture. This is what you were talking about before.
Yes.
So there were 6 matches. Was the Battle Royal, the championship match and then 4 singles matches?
Yes. Yes, that was it, March 29th of 72. And you can see Wednesday night, and it's like, wow. Now, New York, they ran on Monday nights. Fine, no problem. You're in New York City with a good product, so you can run Monday night. And they even had a couple of edgy times when Monday Night Football was taking off. It's like, uh-oh, how's this going to play out? But they always won out, no problem, no questions. But again, with that, you see Baltimore was trying to get off. And see, what used to really be annoying, they would just mention you're going to have women. It didn't mention by name. And that was a slap. And there it is right there, ladies match. And then, the battle royal. There is another part of that program where they do feature them, faces, names. So that was good. But it's like, respect them for what they're doing and give each one their individual, like a credit in a damn movie, And nothing pisses me off more than you see people that, they did their bit because they call them background, kind of like what the derogatory jobber term. The same thing in acting, call somebody, an extra. And it's like, you can't make a movie without them, man. It's just,
Oh, yeah.
that's what it is. You need these people to be there. Otherwise, you're not going to get it done. I was involved with something, Libby Chung, and she gave everybody a credit that appeared in that movie. And I said, oh, I take my hat off to you. That's the way it should be. Well done.
Yeah. It's not, for the person who was in that movie, seeing that name up there, that's everything. You're watching with your family. Look, that's me. Like,
and the pay is shit. So definitely at least give them that. And that makes up for the times when you end up on the editing floor. It happens. And it's like, son of a bitch, you told everybody and their brother, and then
right.
Like, where are you? Where are you? It's like the money, there's bean counters and everything.
Yeah.
What do you think?
As a former bean counter, I agree. I mean, that's, I worked for Citibank for many, many years. And, when somebody wanted to do something, senior vice president turn to me and say, how is this going to impact our bottom line? And then, then it was my turn to say, well, if we do this, then it's going to cost this much. We might get this much of a payback. It's going to, up our unit cost from this to this. Do you want to do this? Do you think it's worth it? So I laid out all the facts. I was the bean counter.
And we extend our invitation to Tony Rose because we know she's out there. And it would be an honor. Whoever wants to join in.
Maybe Tex would want to come back.
Yes.
Tex has a lot of good stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, okay, so when you're traveling on the road, and now I know for a fact that they had a nice setup in the arenas where they were respected. But what the hell do they do? Because they were at TV sometimes, like in Hamburg. Hamburg basically or barely had enough room to put the heels and the faces on opposite sides. So I don't know what they did with the gals. That had to be really a difficult situation. They probably had to say, look, they can go into this half-ass bathroom that was there in Hamburg, and somebody guards the door. You go in and change, and that's about all they can do for you because there's just no space in that place.
Right.
Baltimore wasn't really that big. It wasn't a whole lot of room backstage.
I mean, none of these women were getting wealthy from this, right? I mean, they might have been able to pay their bills, or could they even pay their bills? Did they have to get other jobs? I think Tex said that she was a tow truck driver besides wrestling.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And you're on the road, and you never know what kind of asshole you're going to meet. So she had to be tough, because I'm sure she had to put somebody down a couple of times that got a little bit mouthy or a little bit like an octopus. And it's like, boom, there you go, jerk.
You're not repoing my car. Well, yeah, I think I am.
Sure.
My money would be on Tex Green, but there's so many more women. You mentioned White Venus, Joyce Grable, Cora Combs. Just my opinion, but these women were not only very underrated, but I think very underappreciated. What do you think?
Oh yeah, because I do believe that they had their spot on the card because the promoters felt like they were going to draw, and it was like a sideshow. Because if it wasn't, why did like I give Velvet McIntyre and Princess Victoria all the credit in the world because they did take it to another level. Whereas you could have them on a regular basis. They proved it. And they were like, to me, I always compare them to Vickie Williams and Joyce Grable. It's like they were the 80's version. And it was good because with the expansion, but they really didn't get like the brawl to settle at all. Wendy Richter, who was teaming with Moolah a lot in the early 80's, all of a sudden becomes her opponent. And it's like, well, what about them? How come they weren't part of all? And I remember seeing them on television a lot in a different house shows, but you didn't see them with the big production, like Wendy Richter got. And I'm not knocking Wendy at all, but it's like, I think they paid their dues. Well, Princess Victoria, she got a broken neck.
And then my good friend Desiree Peterson took her place.
Yes. Yeah, Desiree, she was a good worker too. Yes. I mean, hey,
and a really nice lady. We chat every day. Nice lady.
Every day?
We chat every day. Yes, sir.
Wow.
I mean, at least exchange good mornings. No, like we'll I'll tell her like today's leg day at the gym, and I'll get back while I'm doing cardio, and like we each have our kind of talk about our diet and training regimen. Yeah, just a nice lady. I met her at BWC, Jimmy's wrestling school.
Oh, great.
Yeah, just a class act, nice lady. And I'm not paying her, or she's not paying me to say this, rather. So, doing it gratis. But
if Benny gives you the mark of approval, then you take it.
She just and another one very underappreciated. I saw a match with her and Judy Martin, and Judy, another great worker. Judy beat the ever-loving shit out of Desiree for like 15 minutes. And I think even threw her twice onto Gorilla Monsoon's lap. I forget what they wrestled. I think it was in Philly. And then, somehow Desiree gets the roll up, gets the win. And of course, then she gets the shit beat out of her after the match too. But yeah, Judy Martin was another great worker. I think very, very, very underrated.
And she was part of the regular roster, without a doubt.
Yeah. And somebody's saying coach in the chat room that they gave it 100%. They didn't hold anything back, those ladies.
Mm-mm.
You got your money's worth when you watch them wrestle.
And here you go. Now you got to go and lick your wounds and heal on the road, and maybe sometimes you had to go to a hospital, but it's like you definitely, it's tough. I mean, what are you going to go to a hotel room? Luckily, they didn't have to blade like the men did. That would be a little bit too much to ask. But then again, like I told you, Vickie Williams, she took it the hard way.
I saw Tex Green in Puerto Rico, and I forgot who. She had a different name. She was later Awesome Kong, I think. And somebody in the chat room will give her a Puerto Rican name. It was Ripper something, but yeah, she threw Tex into the ring post a couple times. And she hard way. Tex was bleeding pretty bad, and even the video was kind of blurry. And I said she's cut open, and so I texted her. I said, did you get busted open in that match in Puerto Rico? She goes, oh yeah, big time. So yeah, it happened once in a while.
I'd like to ask her, who was the biggest, her or Ann Casey? They were pretty close in size.
I think my partner in True Crime, Brittany Brown, the New England Professional Wrestling Hall of Famer, she's got them all beat. She's a legit 6'1".
Wow, that is great.
Yeah. I think she would have been big time. We would be talking about her. Well, no, maybe not the 70's because she's a little bit younger, but she was one of these people. She had a good job. She's from Situate, Massachusetts, and she did not want to travel. So she stayed, she stayed in the local scene all those years. Great. I mean, I've seen a lot of her videos. Very good worker. Always a heel. Very proud of it. But yeah, I think she would have been in the mix had she decided to, to make the foray into the. And I know they made overtures to her a couple of times, but just wanted to stay home.
I heard that recently about Ox Baker, because everybody said, what happened with the TV taping? How come he disappeared? And somebody said he didn't want to travel. He did not like to fly. And I said, that could be a possibility. They maybe wanted to move him back, or he had other bookings, before he finished up with another territory to start in the Northeast. And, maybe it was like, I just can't do it because, and boom, you're out.
I used to travel probably about 15 to 20 times a year for business. I never loved to fly. I always tolerated flying. That was as good as it got for me.
Tolerating, that's about it.
Yeah. And I mean, fortunately, I flew enough that I remember back then, U.S. Air sent me 10 first-class upgrades. And, I'm one of these white-knuckle flyers. Even to this day, I've flown about 400 times. I have to hit the airport bar before I fly. And when I got on the first class, I said, here are my instructions. Give me a Heineken every 37 minutes until I'm unconscious. And then you can just leave me alone. And it worked out pretty well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, because Ben, I'm with you on that one, man. I don't know. You hit turbulence sometimes, and it's like, of course, they don't help your nerves any with their speech at the beginning of the flight, and it's like they got to tell you this shit in case it does go bad. But it's like,
how about putting the mask on and
yeah, the floating device that is
flotation. Yeah, the flotation device always got me like that. That was the
How many people can react in a situation like that? It's like sometimes you just freeze up. That's it.
Yeah,
and you're going to go down with the ship, or somebody.
You're never going to be. I would suffice to say you will never be that afraid in your entire life. So how would you be capable of rational thought?
Exactly. I mean, even like if you train boot camp, police academies, until it happens, until you're in that situation, you don't know.
I mean, the reason why I'm afraid is because it's not like if I'm driving and I don't feel well, I can pull over. If I'm in a cab, it's like, hey, drop me off at the next corner. You can't say that to the pilot. You're in it with them.
Yeah. Or what if shit starts to go wrong? Because it is mechanical.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It happens with our cars. It's like, what if this shit starts to break down? What are we going to do? We got a parachute? Jeez.
Yeah. I'd feel better if I got a parachute, I think. But, then you got to worry about that malfunctioning, right?
The landing, it's just like, oh, Nelly, here we go. It's like, is this bitch going to stop or not?
Yeah, I've been on a few flights where I thought, like, the pilot cut class when they taught banking the plane, or they skipped out when they taught how to land, because like I've had some rough bankings and some rough landings.
I can imagine, without a doubt.
Thankfully, nothing really hurts. I mean, the worst thing I ever had to do was I had to spend a night in Cleveland because the plane had the engine was fried, and they had to get us another plane. And that was, spending a night in Cleveland wasn't the nicest thing in the world. So
how about the 9/11 when a buddy of mine, and he used to be in the Air Force, and he said they were going to another city. It's like, what the hell's going on? Because he's like, here comes all the commercial planes. And then there were a couple of military planes not far behind. So he tells his wife, get on the phone. Something's happening. So she finds out what happened. They land unscheduled where they were, I think, going to Florida. They ended up in like New Orleans. And it's like, get out. No luggage, no nothing. Just get out of the airport. And it's like, what the hell do you do? Shit. Right. Everything's is left behind. You better have credit cards and then trying to get a plane or whatever, or a cab. It's like, oh my God, rental car, forget it. That was gone in 10 seconds. So wild shit.
Yeah.
Man.
Traveling can be an adventure. So Nikita, sometimes we get so caught up with the Strongbows, the Arians, and the lads that we forget how great women's wrestling was during the 30s. But let me ask you a question. Final question. I don't know how much of the current product you watch, but if you do watch, I'd be curious how you stack up these great talents we spoke about against the current crop. Now, me personally, give me a Tex Green ass-kicking match anytime.
Oh, yeah. Look, even Joe Turco, we kid about it a lot, but Joe Turco in an opener, I would take over anything they put on TV today. And I respect everybody because, hey, look, you're out there, you're putting the body on the line. So anything can happen. And it has happened. I mean, you know, Draws, look at him. God bless him. God rest his soul. And so many other people that have ended up like Bruno got the broken neck. So, yeah, I would put the old timers up against anybody today.
Well,
Hey,
I mean, these women are like marvelous athletes, and I mean marvelous. You know, the Charlotte Flairs, Bianca Belairs. But the one thing I don't like is when one of them will climb up the top rope and they'll do a backflip, and then you have three women, you know, waiting, you know, outside the ring. It's almost like football, like they're calling for a fair catch. Here, let me stand here mesmerized while you jump off, and then you can land on me. And it just, I mean, there's no semblance of reality with that.
I've seen that even with the men. A few times I've caught it, and it looks like a trapeze act. I'm waiting to catch you.
It's gymnastics.
Yeah.
Move you, the flying Walendas?
Yeah.
Is that their name?
This isn't flowing. You know, it definitely does look choreographed, and it does look like it's bullshit, just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, Bruno's managed to sell at the Garden 187 times with 0 Hurricane Ranas. Imagine that.
Yes. Hey, don't forget that question we asked last week. Did anybody send in an answer? If not, we'll give them another week.
No, I don't think so. What was that? Remind us of the question.
Which heel faced all three face champions? And it doesn't have to be the 70s. It would be the 60s, 70s, and 80s, actually. We'll give you that much. But Bruno, Pedro Morales, and Backlund. Or Bruno, Pedro, Bruno, and Backlund. There's not many. And one is very surprising when you hit one of the names, Jimmy Valiant.
I mentioned Jimmy Valiant. Can I venture one more guess? And then if anybody in the crowd wants to, you know, guess, they should go for it. But possibly Nikolai?
No. Nikolai.
Okay.
The only difference would have been Pedro Morales. He never wrestled Pedro when he was
all right.
Everybody else he did except Pedro. But there's a couple in there, a couple of surprises. And you just mentioned one tonight. It's wild. Because you wouldn't think
saying Johnny Rods.
Well, a title match, you know.
Okay.
It counts technically. You wrestled him.
All right. J.A. Wills thinks Stasiak.
Well, I have to do some more research to see, did Stasiak ever get a match with Backlund? That was a title match. Or, well, they were on television a few times. So we'll give you that one. You know, definitely.
He was still around in 78?
Yeah, he didn't leave until early 79.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay. All right. And then let's see. Coach is saying Ivan Koloff.
No, Koloff never wrestled Pedro Morales. Only the night he lost, but he never wrestled Pedro as Pedro the champion.
Okay. All right.
Never got a rematch.
Lawrence Johnson is saying Iron Sheik. I don't think Iron Sheik wrestled.
No. Sheik wasn't around.
He was only Backlund. I mean, he probably wrestled Pedro when Pedro was the IC champion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But not as a world champion.
Here's a clue for somebody if they could pick up on it.
Not Von Raschke, is it?
No, not Von Raschke.
Without the claw, right?
Yep, the claw.
Oh. Let me give see if anybody is going to say it. I think I know who you're talking about.
Yes.
Blackjack Mulligan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And the one that really, I'll just go through it. Ray Stevens, because that match in California counts with Bruno.
Oh, yeah, 67, the Cow Palace, right?
Yep, and he wrestled Pedro and Backlund. He wrestled Backlund in the Meadowlands. Lou Albano wrestled all three champions.
Oh, geez. Who would have guessed that?
And they were title matches, too. Usually cage matches, but yes, because he did wrestle Backlund in Bangor. It was March 21st.
Okay.
And it's like, the ad says WWWF title match, and it's like, I would love to see it, and I'd love to see the promos for it. The promos would be better than the match itself, without a doubt.
Jason Moaning is saying Moscow, but I don't think Moscow to wrestle Pedro.
No, never.
Maybe Bruno is his second run, right, with Bruno?
Yes. Fuji is in there too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, you think about it. I know Fuji got Backlund somewhere, and he had Bruno on television. Maybe not a non-title match, but he wrestled him. We'll say that counts.
I remember that match. Yeah.
Yeah, Tanaka, I'm not sure because in '78, he was pretty much fed up with Fuji and wanted to get the hell out of town. So Backlund had just won, and Tanaka was just filling a couple of big dates, and then he was gone. He didn't even finish some of the other bookings. Like they had one in Boston against the Chiefs. He didn't. He left. That was it. He was done. Fuji was driving him nuts.
Tanaka, my understanding is Tanaka was the wise, truly the wise one. Fuji was a clown, but Tanaka took the profession very seriously.
Well, this is information I got from Nikolai, and some of it even Fuji said during his Hall of Fame induction, some of the ribs he'd pull on Tanaka, and it's like, that's enough. We're done. We are done. Good night. That's why he came back with Saito.
Right. I mean, did they get along well, Tanaka and Fuji?
Yeah, they were good friends, but it's like after a while, too much of this shit is just too much. Because Chief used to say, I told Fuji, you do that shit to me, I ain't going to work with you. And they knew that was money. And so he didn't bother Chief. A couple other ones.
And I'm sure there's certain people like a Bruno he probably respected too much or that he wouldn't mess with Bruno.
Hey, don't forget George Steele. He had all three multiple times.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
George the Animal Steele.
And George had probably both Bruno reigns. Well, definitely had both Bruno reigns.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, because I remember seeing Steele back in early '69, I think.
Yes.
They said he was from Michigan and 29 years old, and that I get a kick out of people who only remember him from his caveman days. But his first go round with the WWWF, his promos were very eloquent.
The Daddy-O stuff, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he the flying hammerlock, which was a devastating hold.
I have the last set of promos. It was for June 6th of '81 in Baltimore, where he was still doing that Daddy-O beat. And he said it in a shoot interview. He said, all of a sudden, Vince said, well, hold on. I want you to do this other thing. I want you. And then he's like, okay. And then he started to act like he was retarded or
with
whatever.
The green tongue and the hey and you. And,
he had the green tongue, but it was when he said, arm. And it's like, this is so stupid. But Vince is like getting a hard on. He's eating it and he's paying the bill. So I'll do it. Whatever.
And this is a man with a master's degree and who is the teacher of all things, right? Acting like a complete moron.
Yes. Yeah, he was better as a maniac that you'd let go, that almost like a homicidal maniac. It's like, you don't know what the hell this guy's going to do. And he doesn't even know what he's going to do. That was great. And when you put him with Lou Albano, and that's next week's question. I'll wait until next week to lay that out on you. But, you put George Steele and Lou Albano together, it's almost like a handicap match.
Right. But he did talk quite well. And I mean, when he first showed up, and then he was beating everybody in a matter of like a minute or two with that flying hammerlock. And then he said he had a new hold called a steel driver. The steel driver was actually a suplex, I think.
Do you remember when he had the guy dislocate his arm?
Yes.
That was 1980.
Oh, that double jointed guy. Yes.
Because the first time I met him, I said, George, I remember that match I had with Rick Bolton. He's like, how the hell you know his name? I said, because I'm goofy. I remember all this shit. And I said, I got a copy of it. He's, oh, I'd love it. He said, yeah, he wasn't a wrestler. But he could do it, on command. So I said, look, just get in there, blah, blah, blah. And then when I put that on you, dislocate your arm. And Vincent Patterson sold it to perfection, screaming, hollering, oh my God.
That was epic.
It was like, wow, that was great.
It's something you never saw before. It's like this. I mean, that guy legitimately, like that arm was mangled.
Yes, that was well done. And of course, when he was stomping on the arm afterwards, which if you know what you're doing, it sounds like you're crushing his guy's arm, his his arm or his wrist, but it's just the heel hitting the mat, the top of the foot. It's just like you're slapping somebody. So it's like
We never knew what we were going to get on TV. That was what was so great about it.
Can you imagine being there live? That had to, they give you a dark match, so that was nice, but it's still, you're going to see before anybody else what the hell is coming. You're going to be in the know, and if you want to report it, that's great. I'm sure a lot of times they were a little bit hesitant that people maybe talk too much, but again, pre-net, what the hell are you going to do? You're going to call people, you're going to write a letter. By then it'll be on television.
Right.
It's no big deal.
Yeah, but even can you imagine being at TV when Larry and Bruno wrestled that exhibition?
Yeah.
I can only imagine like the gasps in the crowd when Larry hit Bruno with the chair.
Well, you can see a bunch of them, especially some of the women that were there. But there had to be about 10% that figured they know what's coming. This is not going to end well, without a doubt.
Right.
Especially once the match got underway. And that's why I say Ariane and Bruno was the best angle, because it was legit, where we knew Larry couldn't beat Bruno if he brought a hammer with him or a baseball bat. It's like,
right.
No, ain't going to happen. He's going to kill you when he gets a hold of you.
What did they even charge to go to those TV tapings? A couple of bucks?
It wasn't a lot, because I know TNT was free. They used just to bring us in to be in the crowd. So, and then they would try to circulate people, because they did 3 tapings there too. But you had to pay for Philly Arena and the Hamburg Fieldhouse. You had to pay something. It wasn't a lot. That's why they threw a dark match, so they could charge people admission.
Right.
But then again, that's why they left the Philadelphia Arena, because it really started to get sparse. They tried to keep people close to the ring as much as possible so it looked full, but it just that must have held 10,000 in there. That was a big facility.
Yeah.
And 2,000 are showing up. The camera is going to pan at some point following the action, and it's like, look at all them empty seats. That looks like shit.
Right. Yep. Well, my friend, I think we're going to call it a night here. It's what time is it? 8:20. We've been going for a while here, but as usual, it was great. And I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight in the chat room. We got Coach J.A. Will. We had Jason Moaning. We had Lawrence Laza Johnson, all the way from Australia. I think Brisbane, Australia. So we got another continent represented there. We got Mitch Seinfeld. Who else? Maria Davis, First Lady of Wrestling. Recently had a birthday. I won't ask her how old.
Mitch is a good supporter, and I'm going to give him a plug. Buy his chopper, people. You'll see what it is. It works. My wife has used it. Victoria has used it for, 10 years. At the chopper, it's a legitimate item. It really works.
Well, I want to also give props to Mitch, because as somebody who, I've worked home shows in the Tampa Bay area for going on 18 years now. And what he does is a lot of work. Setting up displays, being at a site all day, selling, breaking down. It is not easy work. So Mitch seems like a really hardworking guy, and I respect anybody who works hard.
And we need to lure him on one of these nights, because there's a guy, he's been with everybody. He knows so much. Mitch DeMench, he's excellent. Believe me.
Yeah. No, Mitch is a great guy. So I want to thank everybody. And we have a lot of great stuff planned, so please hit the like and subscribe buttons so you won't miss any episodes in this great Monte and the Pharaoh YouTube channel. There is a treasure trove. And you want to watch an interview with Bob Backlund, Barry Windham, Magnum TA, Tony Gurria, you name it, Jimmy Valiant, Patara, Johnny Rods, everybody, almost anybody who is anybody. David Sammartino, which was one of my favorite interviews, because I think Mike got more out of David Sammartino than anybody ever did. And I saw a different side of David. So, if you like good interviews, this is the place to be. But, we'll be back next week to, God willing, to take you on another awesome trip in the wrestling Wayback Machine. So for the great Nikita Brezhnikov, this is Benny Scaler, the one and only player, also the poet laureate of the Monte and the Pharaoh channel. And I'm going to leave you with this. When wrestling nostalgia you crave to feel, tune in on Wednesdays for When It Was Real. hop on board our time machine. When it was real is making the scene. That was a 70s saying, right? It's making the scene.
Beautiful.
But have a good night, folks.
Das Vidania.